Rising prices are just a consequence of inflation. So all this talk about the government trying to scapegoat supply bottlenecks or the economy reopening and ignoring the elephant in the room, which is massive money printing by the Federal Reserve to finance huge deficits by the federal government. That's it.
About 4.5% core inflation. Do you believe these numbers?
No, actually, the numbers are worse. As bad as they are, reality is worse. I mean, first of all, we know what's going on with rent, right? With owner's equivalent rent, which the government uses in replace of actual rent. And actual rents are rising 4 times faster than what, owner's equivalent rent. And of course, home prices don't even make it into the CPI at all. And they're way up. So people who want to buy houses, they're looking at even bigger price increases than the people who want to rent them. But I think a lot of the other, numbers are massaged the way they are, put through the methodology for computing the number. They substitute things. If things go up, they don't count them. The whole system is rigged to give you a low number. And despite the rigging, we still have almost 7%. If you annualize the first 10 months of this year, and then, it's almost 7% inflation measured by the CPI. So, even the government number is bad, but reality is much worse.
When you think about the inflation numbers themselves, it's very obvious that things like food, gasoline, et cetera, are all exploding. One of the takeaways that I had from the CPI numbers was that whether food at home or food out of the home was both up over 5%. How do you think about the basket of goods in terms of the things that people spend a lot of money on, rent, food, utilities, versus maybe some of the more infrequent type of goods that they may consume? It feels like the things that I really care about, those are actually up pretty materially. And then there's a bunch of stuff that maybe I care, maybe I don't, but I just use them less frequently.
Yeah, if you measure the cost of living, if you actually look at the basket of goods and services that people are buying, I think that basket is going up faster than some of the goods that people may not buy at all, or may just buy once in a while. If you look at, let's say, a laptop computer, how often do you buy a new laptop? I mean, maybe every few years. I mean, some people wait longer than that. They make do with the one they have. But you're buying groceries every week, right? You're buying gasoline every week. You're paying your electric bill. So there are a lot of things that, the higher prices, you got to pay. Some of the things, if the prices are down a little bit, you may not even be buying them because you're spending so much money on the things you need. You don't even have that much money left over for some of the other things that you want.
When you also think about things like employment, how do you settle in your mind that there is 11 million open jobs and nearly 5% unemployment number? Like, how are those two things possible to be operating at the exact same time?
Well, either the people who are unemployed don't want those jobs, or they're not qualified for those jobs. But that is a problem in the economy when you have a lot of job openings that workers neither want nor are qualified for. And so the question is, why are they not qualified and why don't they want them? And I think there are different answers to those questions. But certainly one reason that people may not want jobs is maybe they got a better deal from the government. They'd rather collect benefits than collect a paycheck because you have to work for the paycheck. But I also think there's a lot of young people, maybe they got a lot of cryptocurrency and they're just trading, or they're trading stocks on their Robinhood app. And, it's a bubble and they think they're geniuses and maybe they're making enough money just trading crypto or stocks, and they figure they don't need a job.
I'm going to drop some heat on you. You ready? I'm going to tell you 2 theories I have, and you tell me if you think that they're directionally correct or if I'm full of shit. First one is a lot of these people who are, quote unquote, not working, not in the workforce, they do have jobs. They just have jobs that previously people haven't identified, or they have investment gains that people also haven't identified. So I'll give you a very quick example. There's a kid that I recently met. He had for all intents and purposes, a normal job that people would say, okay, you work for this employer, et cetera, previously. He then started to get into all of this crypto world, and he began working for these DAOs. And think of them as similar to an organization. They're just not legally the exact same thing. They don't have employment contracts, all of that. But he's getting the equivalent of a salary or some sort of payment for doing some actions. but that's not showing up in any of the employment data. And the job that he left, I'm guessing, is now showing up as one of the 11 million open roles because they're going to try to fill it with somebody else. And so is there a world where we could try to identify whether it's like the super kind of long tail crypto stuff, or literally somebody now is running a media business where they're posting photos on Instagram and getting paid by advertisers, but they don't have an LLC. They're not using it like a traditional business owner would. Is there a way to start to identify like how many of the people who are not in the traditional workforce are actually operating a job? It's just kind of a new type of job.
Well, remember, you're not considered unemployed if you're not looking for work. So if you're content to be self-employed, you're not unemployed. So you wouldn't be part of the statistics. But certainly, there are going to be people that are in the underground economy that are working for cash. But I don't know if they show up on the unemployment rolls either. They may just show up as, no longer in the labor force if they don't claim to be employed, but they're actually employed under the table and they're working for cash. And you're always going to have a certain amount of that going on. People have a preference for cash because they don't pay taxes, most people. I mean, that's why I think when you see the Biden administration talking about cracking down on tax cheats, that's really who they're after. It's the gig worker who gets paid cash, or the small business owner who gets some of his income in cash and doesn't report it, or maybe takes a lot of personal exemptions and claims them as business expenses. That's where they're looking, because that's where all the tax evasion is taking place. They're really rich. They don't have to evade the taxes. They just legally avoid them. And they don't want to risk tax evasion. It's not worth it to them. But for a lot of middle-class people, it's worth the risk, because if they paid their taxes honestly, they couldn't feed their family. They couldn't pay the rent. So the only way they can get by, given how high the taxes are and how weak the economy is to try to cheat on their taxes.
So when you start to think about, actually, I want to make one point very quickly. As Peter Schiff just called Instagram the underground economy, which I appreciate. But it kind of is the underground economy. It is also supply chains. Supply chains keep coming up in this conversation around inflation. I don't want to make too many assumptions here, but I'm assuming that you agree monetary and fiscal policy decisions have been absolutely insane and undisciplined, but also there are supply chain disruptions as well. There's kind of two of many factors that are at play here. Is there a world where we can assign some of the blame for the supply chain disruptions on the monetary and fiscal policy by giving all these people money? They go spend a ton of it. It puts strain on the supply chain, and that's what leads to some of the breakage?
It's all the consequence of monetary and fiscal policy. I mean, you can try to blame it on supply, but that's not what's going on here. I mean, I talked about this from the beginning. The minute that COVID hit, the correct policy response was for the government to cut spending, because the economy was contracting, people weren't working, and they weren't producing goods and services. But the government did the opposite of what they should have done. The government said, hey, we have to make sure that people who are no longer working keep spending money. Why? They're not earning money. How can they spend? They're not producing anything. But we sent everybody home and said, don't produce stuff, and here's more money, and you can now go out and buy even more stuff now, unemployed, when you're not working, than you used to buy when you actually contributed to the production of goods and services. So we simultaneously reduced the production of goods and services, and we gave people a lot more money to go into the market and buy the goods and services that we weren't even producing. But what's driving the price is the fact that we did the wrong thing. We should have encouraged people not to spend because they weren't working. We needed people to spend less, but instead they spent more. But on what? We weren't making the stuff, so the prices are going up. And now, if you look at the imports, we have record imports. We are importing more than we've ever imported before. The volume is a record, right? Not only are the deficits a record, but the imports are a record. So we've got more supply coming in from the rest of the world than we've ever had in the past. The problem is we've got too much money to spend it on. And Americans are not producing because we're more reliant on foreigners. Because to say, hey, it's about COVID, that's why we're not producing. Well, why is China producing? Why is the rest of the world producing? Because they have record exports. China has the largest trade surpluses in history because it's making all this stuff and sending it to America. I mean, they have COVID over there in China too, yet how come they produce all this stuff and we don't? The problem is we have a more reckless monetary policy and a much weaker economy fundamentally because we're not producing. We're just producing money, right? But when the Federal Reserve prints money and gives it to people to spend, that doesn't mean there's more stuff to buy. So if you got more money to buy the stuff, well, the price of the stuff has to go up. That's basic supply and demand. That's what inflation is. It's an expansion of the money supply. Rising prices are just a consequence of inflation. So all this talk about the government trying to scapegoat supply bottlenecks or the economy reopening and ignoring the elephant in the room, which is massive money printing by the Federal Reserve to finance huge deficits by the federal government. That's it.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 in the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. Fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.